Hello everyone and welcome back to Sector 6, and today what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going over the events and the information that we get in the Aerith section of Trace of Two Pasts, which is the recent light novel that was released and written by Kazushige Nojima. Tifa's section is going to be coming soon once I've got access to the full translation, but the first one that I got access to was the Aerith section, so we're going to jump straight into it. While you're here, don't forget to check out the other videos on the channel. I've got a lot of theory videos going on. I've got more theory videos incoming. I've also got the Big 7, which is the series where I interview other content creators in the Final Fantasy VII community, and we've got a lot more guests coming soon. You're going to be happy with the guests that are coming, but the guests that we've had so far, Schrodinger's Baby Seal, Vizuvazad, see, I said it right this time, Philip Hartshorn, and the Well-Read Mage, have all been phenomenal guests. Each of the episodes is well worth watching. I highly recommend it if you haven't already. So yeah, that'll be in the description. It'll be on a little card now. Go watch it. Also, don't forget to drop a like on the video and subscribe for future content. It definitely helps the channel with the YouTube algorithm and with growing in general. Closing in on 500 subs now, which is halfway to the big 1K. So thank you very much to everyone that's subbed so far. And if you're not, just click that button. It's nice and easy. But that's enough of that. Let's get straight into it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to briefly go over each of the scenes in the book and give a rough overview of what happens. If anything extremely interesting happens, I'll dive a bit deeper into it. And then at the end, what we'll do is we'll go over the main takeaways from this story. Now, the way it's broken up is it's broken up into scenes, like I say, and it kind of alternates. So the very first scene is set on Shinra Ferry number 8, which is the boat from Junon to Costa del Sol. Everyone's disguised in Shinra uniforms, although we don't get any talk of Barrett or Red 13, which, you know, it concerns me. Hopefully they're holding it back. I need to see this. I need to see this. But yeah, what it does is it starts off on the boat, and then the second chapter is Aerith recounting a scene from her childhood. And then the following scene after that is Aerith and Tifa talking about it for a minute, and then back to Aerith's memories, and then back to the boat, and then back to the memories, back to the boat, etc, etc, etc. It just kind of hops between the two. Now, there's a total of 35 scenes altogether, which is why, like I say, I'm not going to read every word. I highly recommend that you go and read it yourself. This has been translated by Stanley FF7 on Twitter. I'll make sure that his link's in the description. If you can support him in any way, definitely jump onto his Ko-fi, because the amount of work that he's putting into these translations is phenomenal. And yeah, thank you to Stanley for this. And yeah, like I say, I do recommend that you go and read this yourself. It's an interesting little story, just like with the Picture in the Past story previously. I highly recommend that you go and read that as well. They definitely flesh out the Final Fantasy VII Remake world and universe. But let's go on with it. So, like I say, scene 1, it is set on the boat to Costa del Sol, which is Shinra Ferry number 8. I assume it's before anything's happened. I assume it's before we've bumped into Sephiroth, before we fought Genova, before anything like that. I would assume that this is early on in the events on the boat. And we get some description of the boat. The boat's a lavish boat, so it seems like in the original game, you know, it was just a Shinra ferry, basically. It was transporting goods. It looks like we're going to see a lot more of the boat, and we're going to have a lot more of the general population on there, like, you know, people being transferred from Junon to Costa del Sol. So it looks like rather than being like a Shinra military boat, it's just a general boat. So that's a bit of an interesting change. Now, like I say, we get a little bit of chatter between Tifa and Aerith, like about how Tifa's used to listening to people because she's, you know, worked behind the bar of Seventh Heaven for so long, and Aerith kind of then goes into conversation with her. And we get the first of the flashbacks. So we're going to jump into scene 2. Now, scene 2 is a pretty short chapter. We get a lot of fleshing out, basically. So it's set in the scene, so to speak, and it kind of covers a lot of the information that we already got in the Picture in the Past novel. And not only that, information that we've already had throughout the Final Fantasy VII compilation in general anyway. So it just kind of talks about how, like, Ifalna was a pure-blooded ancient, both of her parents were ancients, she was under the protection of Shinra, everything like that. But one thing that we do learn, which is quite interesting, is we learn the name of the perspective character from Picture in the Past. Now, in Picture in the Past, we don't actually get any details of his name or anything like that, but we find out that the only person that she could call a friend was Ronnie. So that's the perspective character from Picture in the Past. And he was the son of Ifalna's caretaker, Marielle, which was Ronnie's mother, which we also didn't know. We also found out that he was a couple of years older than Aerith, everything like that. And then we get some details about how she was 7 years old when she first became able to kind of like see the visions from the planet and things like that. That was when her Cetra powers awakened, so to speak. And that by drawing, what she was trying to do was make the visions go away. Kind of like as if by getting them all out on paper or onto the walls, onto anything that she could draw on, basically, that she would banish these visions and kind of like get them all out of her head so that there'd be none left. Now we cut back to the boat for scene 3, and this is where Aerith explains to Tifa how like she and Ifalna were hostages, and that once Aerith's powers awakened, Hojo began to do much more invasive experimentation on Ifalna, because he had a backup now. Until Aerith awoke those powers, he only had Ifalna. But now that Aerith has awoken the powers, and he might not have been 100% that she would, because she was only half ancient, so it might not have been a guarantee that she'd be able to do the things that Shinra needed. But as soon as we found out that she was able to do that, that was when things took a turn for Ifalna. Now, scene 4 picks up post-Picture in the Past. And when I say post-Picture in the Past, what I mean is, with Picture in the Past, it ends, the final scene of Picture in the Past, if I remember correctly, is just before the start of Final Fantasy VII Remake. I don't mean that. What I mean is it picks up where we left off. So from where Aerith awakens her powers, she starts drawing, and then Ronnie's not allowed to go and see her anymore. And the scene starts off with more clarification that Ifalna's work hours, that's how it was described, her working hours increased. And she was basically experimented on all day, from morning to night. That was it, she was experimented on. We also get introduced to another character called Fuzz Hicks, who seems like he's one of the scientists there. And he's kind of providing Ifalna with some medication to kind of take the edge off what's being done to her by Hojo. So when she gets back to the room, she kind of begs him for some help, and he kind of gives her what I assume is some pain medication or something along those lines. We find out that Fuzz has arranged a house in the Sector 3 slums, and he's kind of like the critical component in arranging for Ifalna and Aerith to escape. And what happens is they end up getting smuggled out in a cleaner's trolley, which the opportunity comes because there's an alarm going off that some high-risk test subjects have escaped in one of the labs. Now, whether or not that's real or whether or not that's something that Fuzz has kind of set up, it's possible that they were just kind of waiting for something to happen and then took advantage of it, or maybe Fuzz set it up. It's probably something that he did, in fairness. It seems like there was a plan going on, because he's arranged for the house in Sector 3, like I say. It seems like it's well planned out, and what happens is when they're in the trolley, he gets them out of the building onto a truck, then the truck takes them to a nearby train station, they get onto the train, and then once that train is down in the Sector 4 slums, that's when they're meant to get off. And they're going to be met by someone there who's going to kind of help them out and set them on the way, and then they have to then go and meet Fuzz. Now, Ifalna is extremely ill during these events. Like, this is a massive strain on Ifalna. And we definitely get to see the ramifications of the experimentation that's been done on her. Now, she comes across as an extremely kind and caring individual, very similar to how Aerith comes across. But she also comes across as someone who's kind of doing what she needs to do to survive. She's not very happy about what she has to do. So when they get off the train, you know, they've obviously not paid for a train ticket or anything like that. They're trying to climb over the fence and escape from the train station once they've got off. One thing, when they do get off the train, they're helped by a young woman. We'll come back to that later. But yeah, when they try to climb the fence, this station worker comes over, and the only reason that they get out of the station is because a pretty tall guy comes over and helps them out, gets them over the fence. But then after that, Ifalna's asking the station worker who's just been trying to capture them, like, where she can go to. You know, how she gets to Sector 3, I believe it is, the Sector 3 station. Yeah, Sector 3. So she kind of asks him for directions, and she's apologetic. She says, "Pardon us for our rudeness," or "I'm sorry for being rude," or something like that. Obviously the translation will maybe use different words, but the emotion that's being conveyed is that she's kind of ashamed of what she's doing, but she has to do it. So yeah, that's there. Now, as they're heading away from the station, Ifalna kind of talks to Aerith about the people that she'd asked for help at Shinra. And one thing that Ifalna says is, "I wonder everyone sympathised and cared for me, but no one helped me out. The truly good people are those that not only say they'll help, but act on it. Now, after that quite long scene, we cut back to the boat, and Aerith kind of describes Ifalna having to continually take medication just to offset the effects of Hojo's experimentation. And it definitely comes across as something that's affected Aerith quite a bit, and that it was quite tough for her to deal with. Now, in the next scene, we are back with Ifalna and Aerith, but it starts off with Aerith saying to Ifalna, "This is the Sector 5 slums. The house is in Sector 3, isn't it?" And Ifalna's like, "Nope, this is fine." So, obviously, Ifalna's got no intention of going to this house that Fuzz has prepared for them. It kind of makes sense because Fuzz is still connected to the Shinra. She'll want to completely distance and separate herself from anything to do with the Shinra. So yeah, that makes complete sense to me. And then Ifalna goes on to explain about a location that they're going to in Sector 5. And that location turns out to be the abandoned church. And she talks about God and how God used to exist, but no one really prays there anymore, so maybe he doesn't. You know, that sort of thing. She compares it to the Cetra speaking to the planet in the same way. Then Aerith goes on to talk about how Fuzz might feel bad, but Ifalna points out that she's clearly only concerned about Aerith's safety. That is the prime concern, and that's all that matters. Now, another thing we find out is that Ifalna's completely run out of medication, and she ends up collapsing with a high fever. Now, when she's collapsed, there's someone that helps get Ifalna to one side because she's in the way, basically. She's just collapsed in the middle of the pavement. He kind of gets to one side and then just leaves. That's the end of that. So Aerith goes out and tries to find a doctor for Ifalna. Now, she doesn't have any luck. She ends up getting knocked over by a group of people who just kind of laugh at her and ignore her. And then a woman helps her up, but she doesn't know a doctor either. So Aerith kind of runs off, returns back to Ifalna, who's in a much worse condition than she was a few minutes earlier. Now, Ifalna gives Aerith a pouch and says that it's something from her father, who got it from his mother. It's not good for anything at all. So that's definitely the holy materia there, and she says that it's something that connects the Cetra. That the woman from earlier on that had helped Aerith up followed her over. And just as Ifalna dies, she asks the woman, which is obviously Elmira, to take care of Aerith and take her somewhere safe. Ifalna dies, Aerith gets taken by Elmira and they flee the station because just as they're leaving the area, there's a bunch of Shinra troops and scientists in white coats disembarking from a train that's pulled in, and they're obviously hunting for Ifalna and Aerith. Elmira apologises for Aerith for having to rush her away without saying goodbye properly, but Aerith's fine and she understands the connection between the planet and her powers and knows that she's still connected to Ifalna. Now in Scene 7 we go back to the boat and Aerith's explaining things a bit more to Tifa, about how the flowers at Elmira's house welcomed her and made her feel at ease. She could feel the planet there and she could feel the presence of her mother there, Ifalna. And she knew that Ifalna wasn't left behind at the train station, but she was here with Aerith, a part of the planet. Now, we then learn Elmira's father was a moderately powerful man, kind of like a good Don Corneo, and we get a little bit of a scene between Tifa and Aerith where they're like, "Oh, can you imagine that? A good Don Corneo?" And neither of them can actually pull it off. Now, Scene 8 is a bit of a slice of life chapter, going over Aerith, getting to Elmira's house, Elmira's concern about Shinra chasing Aerith, and we get introduced to a man named Carlo Kinke. Now, I swear down, some of the names that they come up with for these characters are absolutely insane. I just can't deal with it. I can't actually handle it. Now, we also get Aerith having a vision of Ifalna, very similar to how Cloud has visions of Aerith at points in the original game and in Remake. Ifalna tells Aerith that Elmira's having a rough time at the moment, and how she can help Elmira through it when they're talking about how Aerith's struggling to connect with Elmira at the moment. And then in Scene 9 we get an explanation of this ability that the Cetra seem to have. And basically what Aerith says, that when she was a kid she thought that it was a dream, and she thought that she was just talking in a dream, but it's not that. It's one of the powers of the Cetra. We can be one with the floating life of the planet, so the live stream, and through the live stream, and though it seems like there are conditions to it, we're able to communicate with people who we're separated from. So I would assume that the conditions part it probably relates to them having a strong connection already with that person. So in the case of Ifalna and Aerith, that strong connection exists, mother and daughter, so they're able to do it. In the case of Cloud and Aerith, that strong connection exists. You know, you can argue whichever way you want, but there was definitely a connection, a strong bond between Aerith and Cloud. And then we move on to scene 10. And in this one, we get Aerith and Elmira sharing a meal together, learning a bit more about each other. We learn about Elmira's husband, Clay, and his father, Gabriel, while Elmira learns that Aerith and Ifalna were Shinra test subjects. The two connect and bond a bit more over the meal, and we also get a brief mention of the family business, the Gainsborough family business, which is going to be something that we get to over time, so stick with it. Now, one thing that we do get is the fact that when we find out that Clay, Elmira's husband, is a Shinra trooper, Aerith gets a bit concerned, and when she tells Elmira about the fact that she was a test subject, she kind of begs Elmira that she doesn't want to go back, basically, and Elmira confirms that she's not going to send her back to the Shinra or anything like that. So yeah, it's a nice chapter where we see this connection between the two of them coming together. But we also learn a bit more about the situation for Elmira before Aerith. So yeah, it's a pretty nice chapter, this. Like I say, you need to go read it. Definitely go read it. In scene 11, Aerith explains the connection between her and Ifalna a bit more, and also about how the holy materia kind of connects the Cetra. And Tifa kind of makes a comment about who she's going to pass it on to, which is something that Aerith's never really considered, and she kind of gets a bit flustered when Tifa says that to her. And we go back to the story, and in this chapter we meet Meguro, Meguro is Gabriel's right-hand man, so Clay's father's kind of second in command, and he's Clay's childhood friend. And we find out that Elmira has kind of told Meguro pretty much everything that's gone on with Aerith so far, purely because he'll find out anyway, so it's best to just kind of tell him. And Meguro kind of suggests that Aerith and Elmira should be bold. They shouldn't hide Aerith away. They should act as though Aerith's an adopted child from a family member, and just act as naturally as possible. Get Aerith as well known in the area as possible, due to the fact that there are kidnappings going on in the area for people that are trying to get the ransom for Aerith. So they're kidnapping any young girl that they can, dressing her up like Aerith so that she fits the description, and try to kind of pass them off to the Shinra. So in order to avoid anything like that happening to Aerith, they need to get her as well known as possible so that everyone will notice if something does go wrong. It's a reasonably smart idea. And we talk a little bit more about Carlo Kinke, my god. And Meguro says that he needs to be dealt with. We'll get a bit more talk about the business, but just in general, the main takeaway from this chapter is that he advises that Aerith and Elmira be bold and just kind of go for it. Now, we go back to the boat, and Aerith explains to Tifa about the family business for scene 13. And what we find out is that Meguro, whatever, he's the manager for a construction site, a foreman. And what it comes down to is that it's a construction business that was set up in the early days of Midgar. And Gabriel and his subordinates, they were the ones that kind of got involved in the construction in general. But when the plate was finished, pretty much all of the other construction companies just moved up to the plate, because, you know, obviously it's nicer to live on the plate. Whereas Gabriel and Meguro and Clay, Elmira's husband, Meguro and Clay are both like the second in command. They jointly run things with Gabriel, and they stayed under the plate. You know, they stayed in the slums and helped give people work and opportunities in the slums. So due to that, they've got quite a strong reputation. Everyone knows them, everyone loves them, everyone appreciates them, which is where a good Don Corneo comes from as a description. Because with Don Corneo, everybody knows him, everybody hears about him, but they don't love him, they fear him. And it's just the flip side of that. In scene 14, we get more bonding between Aerith and Elmira, and we also get the discussion of Aerith picking a new name. Now that night, Aerith has another vision of Ifalna, and she's happy that Aerith's starting to bond with Elmira and everything like that. Aerith feels bad because she's starting to view Elmira as a mother, which, you know, it must have been tough for her because she already had a mother. But Elmira's just like, look, I want you to be happy, I want you to live your life. You're not going to do that if you're constantly thinking about me. You need to go and have fun. I'm happy. We also then get Aerith being a bit concerned that Elmira's husband might not want her, to which Ifalna kind of dismisses that, like, no, it'll be fine. But then she also says that she's going to go and try and find Clay, which is, quite interesting. We then go to the next day and we meet a few more staff members from the family business. So we meet Rodin and we meet Butch. Aerith also chooses a name, which she kind of does in a panic when she first meets Butch. She goes with the name Rona, which turns out to be the name of Megoro's daughter. Megoro had told her about it when they previously met, and she just grabbed it and ran with it because she was in a panic. She doesn't like the name, but she sticks with it for now. And in scene 15, she talks a bit more about that. She explains how they just kind of settled on Rona, but there were incidents that happened which lead to things changing. And in scene 16, we learn a bit more about Aerith settling in and receiving gifts from family and friends to kind of help her settle. So all of Elmira and the Gainsborough family's friends and associates and everything like that, they're kind of bringing gifts over for Aerith, to try and welcome her to the family. But we do also learn that Elmira's mental state seems to be worsening. So up until this point, every day she's been going out first thing in the morning and coming back late in the evening. The only time she comes back is at lunchtime to kind of feed Aerith, and then she goes back out. And if you know the story of Final Fantasy VII, you know where she's going. She's going to the train station to wait for Clay, because Clay's due back. He should be back by now. But what we find out here is that now she's started wandering around the slums in general, just in case he's kind of gotten lost somehow and can't find his way home. So her mental state's definitely on the downhill. And then in scene 17, we go back to the boat, and it's Aerith's explaining the situation to Tifa. So basically, this is the night. And she explains how her mother Ifalna appeared to her, and she's kind of looking at Elmira with a troubled expression. Aerith gets out of bed, goes to where Ifalna is, and she kind of looks and she can see Elmira there. But she can also see a trooper standing at the door, a Shinra trooper. And then we cut into scene 18 then. And we're back with Aerith, we're stood at the top of those stairs, and she recognises that the person stood at the door is Clay, Elmira's husband. And she shouts out to him and tries to talk to him, but he can't hear her. He doesn't respond to her. And then she again shouts to Elmira to try and get her to notice Clay, and Elmira can't hear her. And then Clay tries to speak out to Elmira, but Elmira can't hear her, and Aerith can feel that he said, "Elmira, I'm sorry." And then after that, Aerith wakes up. Now, she's sat on her own bed, so she's not actually physically got out of bed or gone to the top of the stairs, but she firmly believes that it wasn't a dream and that Clay has passed away, and that moments before his death, his spirit connected with the planet, and he went to a place that he wanted to see the most before he died, which is home. So basically what's happened here is, I'm just going to jump in and try and explain this. So what I think's happened is that Ifalna and Aerith's spirits have both witnessed Clay returning home via the live stream. Neither of them could interact with Elmira during this scene because they're in this spiritual state, they're connected to the live stream. So Aerith's asleep, dreaming, and she's kind of doing probably something similar to the projection type of thing. And with Ifalna, obviously she's dead, she's in the live stream, so she's also going to be doing that projection thing. So they can't communicate with Elmira because neither of them have got that direct connection yet. I assume it's going to happen with Aerith over time, but it seems at this point it's not strong enough. So yeah, because they're in this vision world, they can't really interact with Elmira. Also, they can't interact with Clay, but they can perceive him because of their, innate Cetra abilities. So yeah, it's kind of like a weird scene where all three parties were actually there, but they were all in different states of existence. Elmira is actually there in the real world. Clay has died and he's on his way back to the planet, but he's just kind of stopping through, basically. And then you've got Aerith and Ifalna, they're kind of in that projection state, that Cetra projection state, so they can see what's going on, but they can't interact with what's going on. Very interesting scene, very interesting. Now, when Aerith wakes up and goes to Elmira, Elmira is exactly where she was in the vision, doing the dishes, which kind of confirms what I'm saying there. Aerith tries to tell Elmira, who doesn't believe it. She puts Aerith to bed, she gets angry, and then we get a scene of Ifalna appearing to Aerith, but then fading away. And Aerith can't really understand what's going on. It's like she's losing that connection to Ifalna. Now, the next day was an awkward day. Aerith was alone for most of it. Just because there was like this awkward atmosphere between the two of them. Elmira's obviously angry at Aerith, purely because of what she's tried to tell her the night before. But later on that evening, Elmira gets a confirmation from the Shinra that Clay has been killed in action. And it's kind of at that point that she kind of realises that Aerith was right. Aerith must have seen it, and there's something really special about Aerith. Now, the two grieve together for a while, and we see the guests that we've seen throughout the story, so like Carlo, Meguro, Rodin, all of those characters. They keep coming and help and keep bringing shopping for Elmira and things like that. We also get to see Carlo again, who turns out not to be an absolute bastard. It turns out that he was really close with Clay. So the reason that he was a bit of an idiot towards Elmira was because of him being jealous that Elmira had taken Clay away from him. And Elmira kind of says that she was the same. She'd get jealous when Clay and Carlo would go out drinking and things like that. So that tension's gone between them now, and they're just both sad and upset. I think that's what it comes down to. And we go back to the boat, and Aerith just talks about how the two kind of set about cleaning the house and getting everything back on track. So after a week or two of this kind of grieving period that they were in, and everyone coming to help them and things like that, they kind of snap themselves out of it, they snap each other out of it, and, you know, get everything back in order, get things back together. Now in scene 20, we meet Meguro again, and we actually meet his children this time, Rona and Marchellus. Now firstly, the scene is reasonably peaceful, with Rona and Aerith being friendly, and the discussion about Aerith using Rona's name from earlier on in a panic. But Marchellus, he's definitely not happy about it. He's kind of having little digs at Aerith. And when the children go outside, Marchellus basically tells everyone that Aerith's real name is Aerith. There's a lot of children from the Leaf House, the orphanage, they're over there playing. And Marchellus just tells everybody everything. He also then starts being abusive to the children from the nearby orphanage, you know, calling them things like filthy peasants and things like that. And it all ends in a massive fight where Marchellus takes a beating for his actions. Elmira and Meguro run out and break it up. But then we see a darker side to Meguro in this chapter, as he kind of threatens to crush the orphanage if there's any issues. Like towards the end of it, he's like, I'll go by that orphanage and I'll tell them that Aerith's name isn't Aerith, it's Rona, and blah, 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 blah. But Elmira just kind of says, please, for the love of God, do not do that. And yeah, we don't get any further. Nothing happens immediately, at least. Now we then learn in scene 21 back on the boat that the orphanage is the same one from the remake, the Leaf House. And apparently the owners of the orphanage were suspected of a lot of shady dealings, including selling children. None of the teachers or the other children knew about it. But then we find out something quite interesting. So in the whole scene previously with Marchellus being abusive to the Leaf House students and things like that, one of the students fights back and attacks Marchellus, and this is a child called X. And we find out that that child who put Marchellus in his place grew up and bought the orphanage due to the fact that all of this sort of thing was going on. I don't know if he owns the orphanage or just kind of bought it out and gave it to the teachers or something like that. We don't get any proper details from what I can see. But the interesting thing that we learn is that that child, X, was Biggs. Yeah, so Biggs from Avalanche was X. So technically, Biggs and Aerith grew up together. And given the fact that we see X, Biggs, survive at the end of Remake in the Leaf House, could there be some sort of connection going on there? It's a reach, let's be honest, it is a reach. I think it's more just trying to tie Biggs into the universe, and it does kind of tell me that we are definitely going to see Biggs a lot more, because we're weaving him into the universe a lot more. You know, we're tying him into Aerith's past, we're tying him into the Leaf House's past. I mean, he was already tied into it, but it's much deeper than we even ever expected. So yeah, I thought that was quite interesting. Now, at scene 22, we get plans for Aerith's 8th birthday, but the party that's being arranged by Carlo ends up being postponed due to Meguro having a heart attack. Now, Aerith's upset by this, but she gets over it reasonably quickly, and her and Elmira are about to settle down and eat, and there's a knock at the door. And that knock of the door is Sung from the Turks. And this is where we get the scene from Remake where Sung explains about Aerith being an ancient. Aerith runs upstairs to hide and panic about the situation that she's caused for Elmira. You know, has she put Elmira in danger? Is she in danger? Is she going to be taken back to the Shinra? It just kind of all comes flooding back. Things that she's not thought about for a very long time. Is this, I think, I remember she says something like, is this whole year going to be erased now? because it's been a year that she's been with Elmira, and she's scared of losing that. She's definitely scared of losing that. Now, after a little while, Elmira comes upstairs and she tells Aerith that she's struck a deal with the Shinra. And that deal is that she will watch over Aerith, and if Aerith ever remembers the Promised Land or any information pertaining to it, then she'll contact Shinra. And Sung immediately accepts this. He's perfectly happy with this. And I think a big part of this comes down to the fact that the Gainsborough family are so intertwined with Shinra, which we'll come back to a little bit later on, but there is a strong connection between the Gainsborough family and Shinra. So it's possible that they kind of viewed it as, okay, she's not in our captivity, and we can't run tests on her, which is probably for the best given that she's a child. We'll wait until she grows up a bit. We'll leave her with this trusted family that, you know, has been a part of Midgar's development, and everything will be fine. So I think that's why that agreement got kind of accepted. Now in scene 23, Aerith explains to Tifa that while things weren't perfect, they were good, and she was happy, but then there was another incident that happened due to the brat from earlier on, Marchellus, which is Megoro's son. Now in scene 24, we get Carlo coming to speak to Elmira. Aerith goes upstairs because, you know, private adult talk, this has been happening a lot more the older Aerith had got, to, you know, kind of shield her away from certain things that she'll now start to understand. But she sneaks back to listening to the conversation, obvious, and in the story there's a definite nod to, you know, the scene where Cloud has to sneak out of the house and you have to avoid the creaky floorboards. Yeah, there's a lovely little nod to that, and yeah, good stuff. But we find that Marchellus has disappeared, and there are concerns starting to grow, like there were previously, that Aerith might be taken too. Now this is all due to Don Corneo and a few others who've kind of risen up to fill the void after Megoro's become more ill, Clay is now dead, and the business itself has become more fragile. So you've got a lot of these other people, these other influences starting to muscle in on the area. And the belief is that Corneo or one of the others has kidnapped Marchellus. So the plan is for Aerith and Elmira to move to Calm temporarily. They've got a family member there, they can just go there for a few months and then come back. But then later that evening, Aerith has one of her visions again, and she sees Marchellus in a really bad way, beaten up, covered in blood, on the floor, at the gateway at the Sector 6 slums, so the gateway out into the overworld. And this is just before Carlo's coming to take Elmira and Aerith to Calm. So as soon as Carlo gets there, they tell Carlo what's gone on, and he kind of questions where they got the information from, but Elmira's just kind of like, look, don't ask questions, just go there, find Marchellus, and save it. And what ended up happening was that he had run away from home initially, but then he did get attacked by Corneo's thugs. He escaped to them and then got attacked by a monster. So he really had a shit day, and I'm going to be honest, it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. I'm very happy that things went down that way for him. It was good. It was good. Read the story, you'll know what I mean. Aerith also explains how she feels that the area around her house, so Elmira's house, is what enabled her to see this vision, as she had seen her connection with the planet weaken as she'd grown up, and this area was special, and it kind of links to the resolution scene that we get. It's a special area, and I kind of feel like the church as well, but we'll get round to the church. Aerith then talks about how Carlo had become extremely dependable and important to her and Elmira. You know, he'd stepped into that position of Clay. He'd kind of taken up the responsibilities of his friend who'd passed away. And in chapter 26, scene 26, we get the culmination of the family business storyline. Now, Carlo, this is going to be really brief as well. There's a lot more nuance to it. Please do read over the story yourself. But if you don't want to, there we go. So Carlo seems to get paranoid that people are thinking that Aerith, Elmira, and Carlo had something to do with what happened to Marchellus, with him getting attacked by Don Corneo, and that it was some sort of power play for the business or something like that. So Carlo thinks that Megoro is blaming them for this. So Elmira's just straight off the bat, she's like, right, I'm gonna go chat to him, let's go. So she goes and speaks to Megoro about it, and when she returns, we find out that rather than Carlo being suspected of this, we find out that Carlo's being given control of the business. So Megoro, he's retiring due to ill health, and Elmira was already considering removing herself from the business anyway, due to the fact that she's not really got the time. She doesn't want to bring all of this attention onto herself while she's got Aerith. But it is also something that she wanted to do anyway, so it's kind of a double thing. She wants to protect Aerith, but she also doesn't want to be a part of the business, probably because bad memories, things like that. You know, she's lost a husband, she's lost her husband's father, her father-in-law. She probably wants to separate herself from that. And at the same time, Carlo now realises that, and he separates himself from Elmira and Aerith. And this is the last time that they ever see him again, according to the story. Whether or not we'll bump into some of these characters later on in Remake, we don't know. I think it is very possible that we will bump into some of these characters later on. But yeah, Carlo separates himself from Elmira and Aerith because he also realises the reasons why Elmira wants to do this and needs to do this. And like I say, there's a lot more to this chapter than what I've gone over in this section. Like, it is probably one of the larger chapters in the entire light novel, or at least the Aerith section of it. But anyway, life settles down after this, with us finding out that people were always willing to help Elmira and Aerith. And this is due to Clay and Clay's father Gabriel. Like I said earlier on, they made it possible for a lot of these people to work and have jobs and have homes in the community and kind of set up this infrastructure for people working in the construction industry of Midgar. We also learn a bit after this about children at the Leaf House getting jobs at the age of 13. Aerith wants to do this too, and Elmira kind of reluctantly agrees, but with the caveat that Aerith isn't allowed to leave the area as far as the Leaf House, pretty much. And in scene 27, we just really briefly get Aerith saying to Tifa that, yeah, Elmira was right to be worried. And in scene 28, we find out that Aerith's first role is helping out at the Leaf House. But we do get some tension between Aerith and Elmira, with Aerith feeling restrained and wanting to explore the world a bit more and, you know, get out there. And she's definitely starting to kick into a rebellious phase, and in scene 29, Tifa kind of rebukes her for being... Not rebukes, it just kind of says, oh, that was a bit rough, you know, about how she was behaving towards Elmira. And Aerith agrees completely that she was really bad when she went into a rebellious phase. She didn't have a focus, really, so she was just lashing out all the time. And in scene 30, we get Marchellus again. Aerith's returning home from the Leaf House, and in that little kind of pathway, if I remember correctly, it's the one where we bump into Rude in Remake, and we have that fight with Rude. In that area there, Marchellus and a group of other people are kind of waiting for Aerith. And it's Rodin that's brought them there, if I remember right, and Marchellus apologises for how he was as a child. And we learn about how things have settled down with the business, with the Corneos, and a bit of a war between all of the other various competitors. But one of the main things that we can take away from this is that they were all told that no fighting was allowed in the area around the Leaf House and Aerith's house. It was deemed to be a special zone that no one was allowed to fight in. So Shinra had kind of turned a blind eye to what was going on a little bit, as long as everyone stayed away from these areas. And thanks to Rona, who's part of this group that have come to see Aerith, Aerith realises why this is. It's an area that's been set up to protect Aerith. And like we were saying earlier, the Shinra were very happy. Well, I wouldn't say very happy, but they were quite willing to allow Elmira to keep Aerith and look after her. And it's purely because they've set up this exclusion zone, basically, where if anyone fucks about in this exclusion zone, Shinra will come down on them like a ton of bricks. So it is truly a safe area. It is a prison that isn't a prison. And then Aerith realises that it's the same area that Elmira has told her not to stray away from. Aerith kind of lashes out at her and says that if she's so tired since she's doing all these jobs to get money, why doesn't she just stop and get money from Shinra like she has all her life? And we get the tensions between Aerith and Elmira kind of reaching boiling point here. But there's one other thing. There's a woman in the group who is, I believe it's Marchellus's fiancée, and that's someone called Amber. And she's just kind of giving Aerith absolute dirty looks towards the end of the scene. And that's been put in for a reason, which we'll come to in a minute. Now for scene 31, it's just another really quick chapter, another quick chat between Tifa and Aerith. It's literally 2 lines. Aerith was certain that this was it, she was going to get kicked out of the house. But Tifa's like, well, obviously not, because, you know, you're still there now, so what happened? And this is what happened. So in scene 32, Aerith leaves the house, and what she's got the idea in her head to go to the church that Ifalna had wanted to take Aerith to all those years ago. And while she's going on this journey trying to get to this church, all of these memories of Ifalna start flooding back to her. So in those early chapters, you've got Ifalna kind of talking like, I wonder which direction Sector 3 is in, which direction is Sector 3? I've heard there's a church in Sector 5 in the past, people gathered there. You know, we get these bits of dialogue, little flashbacks of the things that Ifalna used to say to Aerith. And we also get Aerith feeling like her steps are getting lighter the further away she gets from Elmira's house. And the more of these memories come flooding back to her. In chapter 33, we just kind of get more confirmation of that, and kind of like an admittance of guilt almost from Aerith about how she has hurt people, regrettably, in the past, and she's not meant to do it. And I think it comes down to the same sort of thing with Ifalna, how Ifalna had hurt people in the past, but it was all to protect Aerith. And I like the mirroring of that. It's definitely a strong kind of, it's a strong symbolism for the two of them, I think. And then we get to scene 34. Now, in scene 34, Aerith has reached the train station, so she's literally at the edge of the special district. Once she goes past the station, she's no longer protected by the Shinra. So she kind of freezes for a moment, and she's nervous to do it. She's scared. She couldn't see what was going to happen. You know, she had no idea. And then out of nowhere, she has a voice call out to her, Aerith. And it turns out that this is Fuzz from all those years ago, the guy that helped Ifalna and Aerith get out of the Shinra building. The guy that was expecting to meet up with Aerith and Ifalna, and, you know, he had the house sorted out for him to protect her and everything like that. So Aerith tries to run away from Fuzz because she's a bit scared of him, obviously. And then we find out after a bit, once he catches up to her, that the person, Amber, that we met in, a couple of scenes ago, turns out to be the exact same person who helped Ifalna and Aerith off the train all the way back at the start of the story. So when Ifalna and Aerith were escaping, the person that Fuzz had arranged to help them off the train was Amber. She told Fuzz about Aerith, and Fuzz had obviously started sniffing around the station again, and now he'd found her. Aerith definitely doesn't trust him, but they head to the church together nonetheless, because Aerith kind of says, look, I'm heading towards this church, and she doesn't want to go with him, but he kind of says, well, look, I'll walk ahead. You follow as far behind as you want. Just don't be too far away because the monsters will get you. That kind of thing. Now, they walked for a while, and then they got to the church. There was a bit more conversation about God and things like that, about how people used to believe in God. And then Fuzz kind of suggests that they go to the house in Sector 3 and they live together. And Aerith just flat out panics at this point. She's like, what? No? Are you mad? And I think that genuinely he has kind of lost his mind a little bit. I don't know what the situation was. I don't know whether or not he was going to be a good man originally, and just wanted to help Elmira and Aerith, or whether he had some kind of ulterior motives, and that's what we're going to see come to fruition now. But Aerith just flat out does not trust him. So she tries to escape, kind of fails, Fuzz tries to attack her, and then Elmira turns up. So Elmira's obviously followed Aerith, like, she kind of knew where she was going to go. She attacks Fuzz, fends him off a little bit, but then Fuzz attacks them again. Elmira pulls out the gun that Carlo gave them, so when Carlo kind of distanced himself from them, he gave them a gun, just in case anything ever went wrong. She points the gun at Fuzz, fires off every shot, nothing happens. Fuzz keeps on trying to attack Elmira, and then out of nowhere we hear a single shot ring out, and Fuzz goes down with a bullet through his shoulder. Now, Elmira and Aerith kind of have like a little, whoa, what's just happened there, let's get out of here. And Elmira kind of says that she doesn't know how she knew where Aerith was. It's almost certainly going to be Ifalna, but yeah, there we go. And she assumes that the gunshot that just kind of hit Fuzz and saved Aerith and Elmira was the special district being expanded. So this is definitely the Turks, or the Shinra, probably the Turks, watching over Aerith, just following her. So it's kind of a weird one. So at the end of this scene, Aerith says that she's kind of thankful to the Turks for protecting her in that situation. But at the same time, it's also quite concerning that, always watching her. The Turks are just always going to be watching her. So it's kind of a 50-50 thing. Like in this circumstance, they saved the day. In every other circumstance, probably not. And then in scene 35, we get the finale of it. So Tifa asks what happened to Fuzz. And Aerith kind of says that, you know, she never saw him again. She still gets nervous when she sees big people, but she never saw him again. Whenever she thought about him, she'd have mixed feelings about him. She didn't want to see him again, so she didn't want to interact with him or anything like that, but she's definitely guilty about the situation, because she also wonders, like, did Fuzz become like this because of Ifalna and Aerith running away? Did they set off a chain of events that turned Fuzz into a bit of a weird guy? Or was Fuzz always a weird guy and Ifalna was on it and thought, nah, we're not going to go and live with this guy? And then towards the end, the very last part of it, she says that the next story that she's got to tell is about her first love, which is Zack, obviously. And just as she's saying this to Tifa, Cloud walks into the room and kind of stands there awkwardly looking at the both of them. Aerith and Tifa obviously have like a nice girly giggle about it and laugh at Cloud's expense. And then that's it, the story ends. So, yeah, that was... Whew, how long have I been recording for now? 56 minutes. Wow, I'm glad that I didn't go into full detail. Like I say, it took me a few hours to read through it. It's definitely well worth reading. It fleshes out a lot of things as far as Aerith and Elmira. It gives us that information on how Ifalna and Aerith managed to escape from the Shinra. It gives us information on like Elmira's past and her husband and things like that, and how they came to have that house. It gives us backstory on like the whole, like the mechanics of the slums and how it works and how it all came together. Like I say, for me, I think the most interesting things that come out of this is finding out that X is Biggs. So this connection between Aerith and Biggs could be very interesting. I'm not too sure whether I don't know what they're going to do with it. I'm not too sure. I've had feelings that they're going to expand Biggs since playing Remake. So when you play through Remake, Biggs gets a lot of focus, and then Biggs turns out to be alive towards the end of the thing. You have little bits of conflict. It's not full-blown conflict, but you have little tense moments between Biggs and Barrett as well. And I just had a feeling that there was more to come for Biggs, given the fact that, you know, he survived somewhere. We don't know where, we don't know when, but he's definitely survived in that ending scene. And then we find out that he's connected to Aerith. And then we find out that not only was he related to the Leaf House, but he saved the Leaf House from weird owners who were selling children into whatever kind of slavery they were being sold into. So yeah, we learn a lot about Biggs. I think we probably learn more about Biggs than anything. I think that's probably the most shocking thing. I mean, don't get me wrong, obviously we learn more about the slums and Carlo Kinky and Jesus Christ, that name. And we learn about Don Corneo's rise, so to speak, and we learn about the fact that Gabriel, Clay's father, was best friends with President Shinra. Like, they were close. They have a pair of matching rings, and they are the only two that exist. And when Carlo takes over, he gets that ring. You know, it was meant to go to Clay, but obviously, due to him passing, that can't happen. So it goes to Carlo instead. Carlo Kinky, man, what a name. I can't get over it. I really cannot get over it. Like, they need to chill. They need to chill out with the names. But yeah, in general, that, you know, we do get a lot of information surrounding like the slums and the development of Midgar and things like that, but I don't see it being massively plot relevant going forwards. I think that 90% of the stuff that we get in this book is just fleshing out the past, giving us that additional backstory, giving us that additional connection. Will we meet some of the characters? Possibly. You know, there's every chance that when we're in Calm, we might bump into Carlo or something like that. But on the whole, I think the thing that stands out the most for me is A, we found out how the projection skill works. So when the Cetra are able to project their consciousness into someone else's consciousness, we kind of got an idea about how that works, about how it's not a dream, it is a real thing that is happening. But there are caveats around it, and like I say, I think it's going to be that there has to be a connection between the two people before they can do something like that. Like if Aerith tried to do that with Elmira now, it would probably work. But back when she was younger, she didn't have that connection with Elmira, so she couldn't directly communicate with her when she was in that state. It was only when she woke up and went downstairs that she was able to communicate with her. And yeah, the other big thing that we take away from this is X being Biggs, and I kind of feel like there's going to be, I don't know what, but there's something going on with Biggs. Like, I don't know what it is. I could be wrong. There could be nothing. But I've got a gut feeling that there's something going on with Biggs. I need to think about it a bit more. But yeah, First off, we get him surviving the end of Remake, which is like, whoa, what's going on there? And then we get this connection that he grew up with Aerith, which we never got before. And it could just be nothing. It could just be tying characters together. That's all it could be. It could be as simple as that. But there could also be something to it. So yeah, I'm gonna be thinking about that. But that is this video. So that is the entire event of Aerith's story in Trace of Two Pasts. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Like I say, check the description because I'm going to put the link so that you can go and read it yourself. I do highly recommend that you do go and read it yourself because it is a really good story. It's interesting, it fleshes out the world of Final Fantasy VII, and while you're over there, show Stanley some love. But don't forget to drop a like on the video, subscribe for future content, but more importantly than anything, have a great day.